It looks like we have people still joining, but I'm going to pass it off to Dori and Shaun. We can get started.
Thank you, Amara. And hi, everyone. My name is Dori Gray, and I'm a senior community manager here at Social Edge Consulting. And I've been working with employee communities for 7 years now. And I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm also thrilled to introduce you to Shaun Slattery. Shaun is the Director of Customer Success at LumApps. Many of you know Shaun or know of Shaun, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that Shaun is a legend in this industry with over 10 years of experience working in social business and with digital workspaces. Shaun has really seen it all. Today, we are talking about the unified digital workplace and whether it really exists. Hi, Shaun.
Hey, Dori. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm so excited. I feel like even before we met, I knew about you for so long. So
I've just been around.
Yes,
It just comes down to time in the field, boots on the ground.
Yeah. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start with the term unified digital workplace. I know for me, this phrase would have meant something very different even 5 years ago than it does today. And you've been working with internets for a very long time. So I'm excited to hear your take on it. So just tell everyone here, what exactly is a unified digital workplace?
Yeah, the definitions are always the tricky bit. That and the nomenclature always keeps changing, right? So we've seen things go from enterprise social networks to social intranets to digital workplaces to employee experience platforms. But largely they are motivated by the same thing. And I like the term unified digital workplace because it encapsulates many of the critical ideas. And I like to break each word down and kind of think about, okay, what work is this word doing in this phrase, and how can we use it to really think about what we're trying to create. So I think the unified digital workplace is a real thing. I think more than any one particular technology, it's a goal enabled by technology, because there's some work to be done to really bring it into reality inside your organization. So I like to start with the workplace first and think about all the things that the workplace means to the employee experience. Like it's a place, right? It's somewhere I go and there's a sense of place there and a sense of community and ideally a sense of belonging. And the work part of it's absolutely there too. So it's where we go to, apply our professional skills and, help organizations achieve their missions and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of traditional workplace activities, but workplaces are also places where, we connect and engage with others. There are communities of practice, there are employee resource groups, there are softball teams and running clubs and, a lot of different ways of being at work. And increasingly, HR conversations turning to bringing your full self to work and allowing employees to express multiple parts of their identity in their workplace. So if that's what we're trying to achieve, that's what the workplace part of unified digital workplace is. When we work backwards in the term, what's the digital part? And that's increasingly important. We recently at LumApps had our customer advisory board and brought a lot of our strategic customers together to ask them, what are you guys looking at in the year plus ahead of you? And the phrase on everybody's tongue was hybrid work. That post-pandemic or even still in the pandemic, finding different modes of working and different ways to allow people to engage one another, whether they're physically in a workplace or distributed even amongst the team, where some folks are co-located and others are remote, or remote first employee practices. That really puts up a premium on the digital part. And that's where I think organizations are really deepening their thinking about what does the digital employee experience then come to look like. And when we load that word digital in front of workplace, it's the ecosystem of tools and applications and technologies where me and my team and my organization are communicating, are collaborating. There are sources of record, there are sources of data. that I have to touch all these things as a worker throughout the day. And that brings us to the last part of unified. And what is it that we're unifying? It's really that ecosystem. We're trying to create some coherence out of that ecosystem so folks don't feel the pain and kind of the cognitive load of application hopping, throughout the day, and a lot of anxiety around, well, where was this? And, all the inefficiency of where did I store that? Who does this at my organization? How do I even find that person? So, in high level, that's what we're trying to tie together is that employee experience mediated by technology and pulled together to create a coherent employee experience, despite representing a lot of different apps.
Wow. Yes. You said so many great things there. So I'm just going to stop at where you talked about the hybrid work environment and basically just how work has changed over the last year for people. So how does having a unified digital workplace take all these changes into account and make that employee experience better and easier?
Yeah, I think now's a really great moment for organizations to take a beat and take a step back. A lot of folks were talking about remote work through the pandemic, and I feel that's a little mischaracterization. I've been a remote employee for a decade now, and how I worked pre-pandemic and how I worked during the pandemic were very different experiences. I'd say a lot of organizations during the pandemic fell into kind of emergency stay-at-home work situations, not true remote work where I have some flexibility in where I can go and where I'm working from, and I have the capability to travel into the office or to a customer or what have you. That was all pulled back. Now that some of that is opening back up and we can be mindful and purposeful of when do we work co-located and when do we work remotely, we need to be thinking about what tools and technologies do we bring to bear to best support that activity. So a lot of the conversation at the beginning of the pandemic was around Zoom fatigue and chat overload and, Slack overload. And because the face-to-face had been kind of lopped off of a lot of employees' working experiences, many of us fell back to real-time collaboration technologies, Zoom, real-time meeting applications or real-time chat application. But that's not always the best way to work remotely. And I think organizations are figuring out that we might need a few different modes of working, a few different channels that allow us to work synchronously when necessary and asynchronously when possible, to really leverage the capabilities of the technology to support work. Let's say you have a globally distributed organization and real-time meetings are difficult, or folks are left out when the chat is happening and somebody logs in 6 hours later and there's just oodles of discussion that they've missed out on. That's really hard to find a groove and a way into, whereas asynchronous collaboration technologies like discussion threads and communities and even knowledge bases and I hate to call it slow tech, but slower tech, can really be important in developing the organization's knowledge capability. If everything's happening in real time, there's no kind of collection of best practices or good documentation of learning that the organization is doing through discussion and through the outcomes of meetings and things like that. So orgs and the customers I'm speaking with are kind of coming to realize that we need to be really intentional going forward in what tech we use and when and for what purposes.
So how do you work that asynchronous discussion or conversations or work into the digital workplace?
It is around oftentimes use cases. So what situations, what business challenges are you looking to address with your ecosystem? And then what is best brought to bear on that? If it's a check-in meeting and we have 5 team members and they're not so very spread around, a face-to-face meeting, a stand-up meeting, these are really tried and true business practices and processes and mechanisms. Where they begin to break down and don't serve the organization is providing insight into what happened in that meeting and anybody else being able to benefit from them. And that's why when we're having use case conversations with the customers about what business challenges or use cases are you trying to support with LumApps, we're listening for areas where structured knowledge is going to be really important, where ease of access or content targeting is going to be especially important, where the groups maybe aren't already pulled together in a known team, but are perhaps a little more ad hoc, or anybody in the organization may benefit from this, or we want to disseminate information more broadly out of a team learning and into an organizational learning.
So one thing that I've learned is that employees are going to work where they're going to work. So let's say you want to bring them all into the digital workplace where that knowledge is stored, but they're not typically using it day in and day out, like some other employees might be. How can a unified digital workplace accommodate employees relying on different systems, and how can it bring them together while meeting them where they are?
Yeah, so, and that's an absolutely important goal and a truism about human behavior. And so being mindful of that and then thinking about what is it we're trying to unify with the digital workplace and what mechanisms do we have available to us. Let's say, for example, that my product team is living in Zendesk because they're using that to manage, feature rollout. Okay, I'm working on this ticket. I'm an engineer. I'm developing against this capability. Well, that's great if I'm living there, but other people depend on my work and the outcomes of it, like a customer success director or somebody. So our own product team has stood up a Zendesk dashboard inside LumApps where I and my customer success team, who don't live in Zendesk, don't like to go there particularly, get confused and lost if that's the front door that we're coming through. They've staged a dashboard for us that says, hey, here's the feature set that we're working on and the target release dates and things like that. So if we have a specific customer question, we can hop in and look at the status of something in a tool where we don't live and breathe, but allows them to work where they work, gets us the information we need in a context that we need it. And that's what's really hard about tool hopping, is it's the constant context switching or the lack of context. One of the main challenges of being an employee in kind of contemporary organizations, knowledge-based workers and things like that, is figuring out who knows what, who's working on what in any given moment. And one option is to run around and bug everybody. And, in the old days, it was pick up the phone. Now it's you ping everybody, right? Oh, let me ping Aaron and see if he knows. Let me ping Sarah and see if she knows. But if I'm able to look things up or drill down through context and say, oh, well, I know it's within the product team. If I have some structured information that says, well, here's who the product team is and who does what within the product team. And oh, by the way, here's their Slack channel or this sub-team's Slack channel right here. Then the organization can do some of the lifting off of the individual knowledge worker and say, here's how we organize ourselves. Let me provide you some global nav inside a unified digital workplace tool like LumApps, path you through and provide some wayfinding clues to, okay, I know they're in the product team. Oh, this is the part of the product that I'm looking for, and here's who's who within that organization. And oh, lo and behold, this is where they're living and breathing, is they have active Slack channels, the names of which I never might have found on my own, by the way, right? They're named acronyms, they're named, SWAT teams, and, it's hard for an employee. It takes a lot of time to learn all that context.
And do you see people doing this well?
Sometimes. So that's why I say it's a goal. And a lot of the act of unifying isn't a technological act. It's a business activity. It's a governance plan, pulling together stakeholders from across the organization and coming up with a game plan for what needs to be unified and what context can we provide to help our colleagues find one another. That's half of the lifting, right? So the tech part and hooking things together and scripting the APIs so that this can call this and surface a dashboard. LumApps can handle that stuff, but it only goes as far as the organization puts some effort into putting it together. I use a lot of gardening metaphors when I talk about the digital workplace, that we want to put the trellis in place to help the organic structure grow in the direction and path and ways. And when weeds pop up and things like that, somebody's got to hop in there and like pull out the old outdated content so people don't get confused or lost or find the old thing and go, well, I know this is old, so I'm trusting nothing else that is in this information resource because I got burned that one time. So it does take some tending and care.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I feel like it's so easy to talk about all these great ideas. What advice would you have for someone who loves what we're talking about today, wants to make this happen, and has no idea where to begin?
So we've got some great techniques and frameworks. We call them the LumApps strategic frameworks that the customer success team is using to facilitate these conversations with the customers. There are life-learned lessons out of a lot of my time in the field and my teams and colleagues' time in seeing what techniques have successful organizations learned and created for themselves to help with this. So one is, I call it the technology landscape analysis. And it's just a framework to inventory what all tools do we have and who's using them and for what purposes. So it's really just taking a lay of the land to go, what all are people juggling and trying to hop amongst? And at least if I can list that out, I know what my employees' real lived experience is, the digital experience that they're facing. And I and my colleagues as an organizational level, this is another mapping, is the people part. So what digital employee experience do we want to create for employees? And what of these applications need to be tethered together or linked to or context provided around so people can make better use of? And that's a really productive way of thinking about it, is with a little care and thoughtfulness, we can deepen the value of any given technology investment that we've made. If we just help people find it and use it better, that's always worth, just a little bit of time and planning. So those are two big ones: is the technology landscape analysis and some governance planning. And that governance planning includes getting the right people to the table and having a regular cadence of meetings around. It might be a digital workplace steering committee. Some of our customers have been partnering with us recently on pulling these kinds of cross-functional teams together that might have representation from whoever has historically owned the intranet, oftentimes a comms or HR team or an IT team, but then partnering with the sales organization or the product division to learn what needs do they have from a unified digital workplace, and how do we design pages and experiences and target content and applications to support those many different stakeholders across the business.
Yeah, I mean, this all sounds really, really amazing. I'm trying to think, like, in terms of places I've worked, like how that might look and where people might get stuck or confused. The one example I think of, and you've mentioned this before, is Okta, which I use at a previous company, where you have that set of checklists, which are just little boxes with the name of each application, and you don't know what they're for, you don't know why they're there, and you don't know what to do with them. So how can a unified digital workplace help make sense of that for employees?
Absolutely. I've mentioned a couple times the idea of creating an employee experience. And I like to, pose to my customers, where do your employees start their day and what is that experience like? Is the beginning of an employee's day a page of a bunch of named applications and buttons? And what does that do for my experience of the organization and my alignment to the strategic direction, my feeling connected to the mission, vision, and values of the organization? And I oftentimes argue not a lot. Or do I start my day in an inbox? Is my experience of the organization an inbox with just, times and stamps and or message previews and then flags and stars and all the things that I'm, having to juggle? Or do I come to a page that is branded, with my organization, where I'm seeing the news of the day, where I'm seeing the faces of my colleagues and the activities they're engaged in, because that content is being targeted to me. And from that front door, from that digital destination, can I then hop into my task work and get the right application, or drill into the team room where my colleagues and I are collaborating, or hop over to the right Slack channel and engage the right team. So I think that's a great place to start, is figuring out, where do my employees start the day? How do I want everybody to feel, and what do I want them to see when they walk in? Because we put a lot of effort into our design physical workplaces, right? The lobbies, and what artwork goes on the lobby, and do we have a history of our organization laid out on the wall like some of my customers do? Do we have our mission and values posted on the walls? And what's that supposed to do for employees as they kind of come into work for the day and get ready to get down to the business of the day?
That makes me think of, I had a job, and they were waiting over a year for very fancy tile from Italy for the bathroom. And I'm thinking, like, if they put so much thought and effort and money into the tile in the bathroom representing the company, like, why wouldn't they do that for the digital workplace, where every employee is seeing that day in and day out and getting their information? So
yeah, and with the attention now to digital experience, employee experience, and some of the real challenges organizations are facing are on decision making for real estate investments. That's exactly the right kind of set of questions to be asking about. We put a lot of effort into designing experiences for our employees in the physical world. Why not the digital?
So why do you think some companies are hesitant to be all in on this unified digital workplace?
It's hard. I mean, like, the tech isn't the hardest part. It's the coordination of team members, and sometimes the investment in resourcing to support these digital investments. I mentioned the garden metaphor. Well, a successful garden takes some gardening. And that is the information management, content management activities, and frankly, some of the unglamorous stuff that it takes to create a great employee experience. There's a lot of care and planning, and we do this in the physical as well. When we think about how we upkeep our physical spaces, we should similarly be thinking about how we upkeep our digital spaces to protect that, especially initial investment, right? We get the thing launched, it looks beautiful or whatever, to keep and maintain that beauty, and to keep the digital workplace evolving to support our next business initiative, our next acquisition, each of which sometimes might require some tweaks in the digital infrastructure. If we acquire a company, we've got a lot of other information that needs a home and needs to be folded into our information architecture. And so, there's some additional work that needs to be put in there. And I think that's what is difficult for organizations. But with some decent governance planning, and it doesn't have to be overly burdensome, just that coordination of areas of responsibility and stakeholders who get consulted on decision making. That lightweight structure can often be enough to really help coordinate and do the coordinating work that helps it be successful.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. So what are some attributes that will make a digital workplace successful? What do they all seem to have that in common that for the successful ones?
Yeah. There too, I think about the patterns I see over and over, and those patterns come out of areas of business need. So business goal 1, strategic alignment, folks knowing what are we trying to do and where's the boat steering, and what are we focused on and challenged with. And that happens through a lot of news content. And so our ability to target content, so certain content is important for everyone. Certain content is useful for some people, but nice to know for others. And then still others is more useful from an opt-in basis. We don't want to push it to everybody, but hey, there's great stuff here for the areas that are interested in it. They might be communities of practice, like all the project managers spread across my business. They may not report to each other. They may exist on different teams, but golly, it's nice to have a place where project managers can come together and share, what they're working on, or new methodologies, or things that are shown successful in one corner of the organization, so that it can propagate out across the rest of the organization. So strategic alignment is a critical one. Supporting digital collaboration. So those work best practices and the capturing and making discoverable lessons learned. So if there's a project postmortem, as they're sometimes called, that only happens in a face-to-face meeting, it's just the folks in that room who benefit from that thing. But if it's published as a post in a digital workplace, well, then it's discoverable. And if somebody's searching for, a keyword that happens to be in that best practice, you've then benefited from that team's time together in the room. So digital collaboration, enterprise collaboration, strategic alignment, employee engagement is another critical one, of feeling connected. And I'll talk with my customers frequently about their mission and values. Yeah, they're posted on the walls, but where does an employee go to express that value or have their living of that value recognized by the organization or by peers? So we'll frequently recommend a use case like a shout out corner or a peer recognition community where folks can say, hey, I just saw Dori deliver an outstanding customer meeting. The customer was thrilled, and we just got this email back from them about how excited they are to get started. And you can post that. And that employee then gets that recognition, and at mention gets them a notification that they've been mentioned. And like, these are the little things that we put into place to make sure we're building opportunities for employees to have this experience in the digital workplace. Those are a couple of the big ones, but I could go down a list of business goals and say, here are some use cases that well support that business goal.
So over the last year during the pandemic, but even before that, video has been changing and becoming more important. What have you seen? How does it help amplify the digital workplace?
Well, I think one of the things that has been most missed through the pandemic has been that FaceTime, the seeing one another's faces. And I think it's why Zoom fatigue became a thing, and virtual happy hours became a thing. Is, we crave that connection and that interpersonal, and oftentimes, work adjacent kind of connection. So folks catching up about their kids, the cat's running in the background of the Zoom meeting. Like, those are the points of human connection. And video is what helps bring some of that sense of immediacy to a digital experience. So even though you and I are far apart, I can see your eyes, I can see your expressions and your reactions and things like that. And that immediacy is part of what helps foster that human connection. So video is a critical part, oftentimes of communication goals, but even supporting the collaboration and just a posted message from a team leader, things like that can go a long way. It's one of the reasons, for example, of our investment in the acquisition of NovaStream, a video streaming partner, or now team members of LumApps, as we develop LumApps Play, so our own native hosted digital offering to make that video as rich and robust inside the LumApps platform and the unified digital workplace as possible.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
We're excited. Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely sounds exciting. I think that there needs to be improvements to video experience in general.
Yeah, they're hard, to do right and to do well, and to create the right opportunity to interact, because there's the synchronous stuff, but then there's also the asynchronous, right? So the town hall happened before I was there, or this team delivered this meeting or presentation for themselves, but they want to make it available. And after the fact, where can it be stored and found and interacted with or discussed? And that's one of the things that I really like about a solution like LumApps is this isn't just a video posted up in a shared drive that I go and watch by myself and experience personally or individually. I can discuss it with my peers. I can share it with my team. If I got something particular out of it that's germane to something we're working on or struggling with, I can say, hey gang, check this out. So those are the little things that digital affordances like a share button or a discussion thread, really round out the experience of that one artifact that in and of itself can be great, but it can only do so much because it doesn't facilitate, interaction and those sorts of other ways of engaging the content that we could have.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. So to change topics a little bit.
Sure.
Some people are searchers and they will use search and that's how they'll get their information. And some people are navigators and they will only go to the navigation and they probably will hardly ever touch search. So how can a good unified digital workplace let both these types of people easily find what they need to feel connected?
Yeah. Part of it is understanding the search algorithm that your technology is using. LumApps has its own native. We can connect with Google Cloud Search and other search applications. So part of it is understanding what's under the hood and how, especially if there's premium content, right? Like the official stuff of the organization, the most important stuff. If the teams that own that content have a bit of understanding about what is the search algorithm looking for, they can optimize the content. That's why Google works so well. Everybody says, oh, I wish my enterprise search worked like Google. One reason Google is because people put a lot of care and effort into getting their stuff found by Google, right? The search engine optimization is a whole industry. And inside organizations, we tend not to put that level of care and effort into our content. And it doesn't take a lot. It can just be careful titling or making sure you use metadata to help that piece of content get found again. Or even our promoted search mechanism, which says, hey, we know it's enrollment time for benefits. So when people search benefits, I want them to find this piece of content because I know from my analytics, this is another best practice. I know from my analytics that this is what people are searching for. And so there's a couple things there. One, and it's mostly worth doing this for a small subset of content to ensure that people find it readily and easily, is doing some good titling and use of metadata and the things that help content get found, paying attention to your search data to understand how people are searching. So that's, things that can be done to help the searching population find the things that they're looking for. But we do have our browsers and folks who I jokingly refer to it as navigating by muscle memory. It's 3 menu items over and 2 menu items down, and it's the second fly out. I had a customer who changed their navigation, and she said, I was the most hated person in the company for a week and a half, and then everybody kind of figured out the new way and got over it. So we do rely on those things. But the navigation can be part of that context setting that organizations could put more attention to. Because that's what makes it hard. That's what you spend your day on sometimes. It's like, I need to find out which team owns this. And it may not be organized in a way that's intuitive to me, or if it's not named something that I recognize, I might not know it if I see it. Mm-hmm. So it's just some good, careful naming of links or some thoughtfulness around, the grouping of information and then, helping people find their way. Maybe there's a product landing page and there is a jumping off point. And I can see, oh, the product team is actually 6 different teams and each is responsible for a different area of functionality. And here's who's in charge of that area of functionality. And that does take some time and effort by an organization to say, yeah, we've got the org chart, but let's help people find who they're looking for on this landing page, say. By giving them enough context that they can make an informed decision. And we can cut out, half an hour's worth of asking, hey, do you know who knows so-and-so in the product team?
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like the main themes for ensuring a successful unified digital workplace, which does exist, is making sure it provides that overall context. I think that's probably the most important. Making sure that the integrations and the other systems that are connected are what people are using and that they can do what they need to do through the unified digital workplace. Balancing that asynchronous and synchronous communication and governance, and ensuring that the organization is committed and is willing to put in the work and maintain that governance.
Yeah, and that governance can also help the digital workplace be proactive. So if we know we're acquiring a new company, and one of the main hurdles of an acquisition is the cultural integration of one team into another. So yes, we have the technical project of, we have two information systems and they were on, this old intranet and we want to bring them into the new intranet and everything needs a home and what do we name it? Like there's work to be done there. But the longer work is how do we make them feel part of the new organization? How do we help them understand who we are and what we value and how we work together and make them feel welcome? And I've seen customers do an outstanding job of this with a little bit of planning and some welcome messaging and other teams taking group photos, back when it was easier to do that, and just saying, hey, new team members, welcome. We're the Atlanta team, and here's our office over near Peachtree, and when you come down, we'll go to this favorite hangout. So it's those kinds of things that an organization with decent governance can help lay a game plan for, so that they can really capitalize on the next opportunity. And their digital workplace can be responsive to the changes in the organization or in their market. So a good governance team can do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to what you said earlier about letting employees express the multiple parts of their identity at work. So you can be welcoming and be informative and then show up who you are in other ways as well, all in this one place where you're getting your work done, but you're also having fun.
Yeah, and it can be pretty beautiful when those things are happening in concert, and one can serve the other as well. Meeting a team member in the Austin team. So I'm based in Chicago. LumApps has a great presence in Austin, a lot of proud Austinites there. I can make connections as somebody's kind of expressing their pride in their city and get to know who somebody is. And that's how I learn what team they're on. And oh, by the way, they're knowledgeable about this part of the product. So when I have the product question that's going to affect my productivity and my efficiency and my ability to answer a customer's question, I know who to reach out to because we had an interpersonal connection. So these don't have to be one or the other. They're not just social fun places and then the real work happens over here. They really can serve one another when they're happening in close proximity, and a unified digital workplace can help that happen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Before we open it up to questions, do you have anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is important to note about the digital unified workplace?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of some recent questions. In conversation with the what do we unify and the technology landscape analysis, I'll have customers say, okay, I've mapped everything, now what? And that's where I'll challenge them to say, okay, you've got all these different things that are, some are being used better or worse, or as much as you would want, or woefully under adopted across that ecosystem. What should they be used for? Or what would your organization prefer be used for what? And coming up with that organizational point of view can be a real help to an employee of, my organization has a what to use when point of view. When does it make the most sense for us to leverage a meeting technology? And is there a best practice for sharing something out of meetings so that anybody who wasn't in that meeting can discover something and get something that they wouldn't have if they weren't in the room or logged in at the time. So just a little bit of mindfulness in that beat, and then kind of sharing that with employees to say, here's how we want you to use the ecosystem to leverage it best for yourselves, but also to help the collective effort of the organization. So that's one I've been working with on a couple of different customers lately, is what to use when.
Yeah. Oh, that I feel like that's always been a question. But I do also think that the unified digital workplace is helping to make that a lot clearer and cleaner by keeping everything unified.
Yeah, especially as organizations figure out, well, now that half of us are in office and others aren't, now what do we do? And those are the questions on the top of my customers' minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't have anything else. I think this has been really fun, and I'm excited to see if anyone here today has any questions.
Yeah, happy to discuss. Love
Yeah,
to
I mean,
hear from
feel
you.
free to use the Q&A or the chat, or you can, Amara, if they can unmute there, they can also.
Yeah, if you click on raise hand, we can actually unmute you if you have questions and you want to come off mute.
Naturally, this means all of these many coordinations are happening well inside the organizations that they're interacting with.
I'm not seeing any questions. But that was super insightful. I think we can give it, another minute. See if anyone. Oh, here we go. Edward.
Hi, Edward.
Hi, Dori. Hi, Shaun. Hi, Amara.
Hi.
Uh, thank, thank you for the great insights. Just appreciated the conversation. The part that resonated most with me was a connected environment in the context of the pandemic. I know many of the audience here may still be working primarily remotely. So my question, Shaun, is what lessons can we take from some of the things that we did in the pandemic out of necessity? I think we were, when I think back to maybe like a year ago when we were heavily in the throes of it, there were things like the happy hours that we were being very intentional about. Some of that has waned as restrictions, at least here in the States, have loosened up a bit and people are interacting a little bit more. What lessons in terms of digital interaction and building a intentional digital workplace can we take as we start to return to some sort of normalcy?
I think that's a great question. Thanks, Edward. I think part of it is figuring out when we have these particular experiences, what did they serve and support, and then just being intentional about it. So what can be a little tricky, and I think where we hit fatigue and things fell out of fashion a bit, is it kind of became an always on. And these lessons learned can be something that we bring as a practice within the organization and deploy intentionally. So if it's been a while since the organization got together, we don't, force them or anything like that, but maybe we start to offer them more interspersed so that there's less pressure, less fatigue, and when they are offered again, it's a little more, what's the word I want? Novel. It retains some of its novelness, and that makes it more likely to for folks to engage. So I'm part of a team that has had difficulty getting together. Because of the pandemic. Some of my team members are co-located, some of us are remote employees, and it's just been difficult to get together. So being able to get together face to face periodically really goes a long way to supporting the interpersonal collaboration, while also getting the work of the job done, the task kinds of things, does rely some good business processes and some standard ways of tracking and where do we store certain kinds of information. And so it's just kind of figuring out, what all am I trying to support? Where does the task work go? Where do the project handoffs happen? Do we want those documented here or there? Hey, it's been a minute since the team got together. Maybe it's time to offer this kind of virtual, but real time and virtual face-to-face kind of interaction. Because I think this is exactly what customers and organizations are going to need to figure out, is if we're reducing our real estate footprint downtown, when do we bring people together into the office? And therefore, what does the office need to be designed to do? Do I need more breakout rooms? Do I need bigger conference rooms? Do I need more phone call style booths? Like, given the patterns that we now need to anticipate, how do we reconfigure the physical workspace? And we can do the same thing digitally. Now that half of my gang is going to be remote at any given time, what are the patterns of interaction that I need to facilitate? And therefore, what do I intentionally build and draw together in the digital workplace to support those interactions? And then we want to signal all of that to our employees. Change management is absolutely key. Hey, employees, here's how we've organized the physical workplace, and here's how we want you to reserve rooms, or when we think it's best for you to come together as a team physically and face-to-face. Here's what we've done with the digital workplace and how we would intend you to use it. We can do those same good change management practices in both places. It's a comment from Ryan. It reminds me of being in college and getting together for a group project. Where are we meeting? How about this building? Rooms aren't available. How about this one? Yeah, the negotiation of space and people's familiarity and comfort level with different. Let me go one other place with this, because I think this is the non-technology side. It's part of conversations I'm really interested in. I also am an adjunct faculty member with Northwestern University in their graduate program, Learning and Organizational Change. And organizational capabilities and employee skill sets is something else that will need to evolve in the wake of all this. And it's something I'm spending a lot of time thinking about in concert with the digital workplace, is what are the collaborative capabilities of individual team members? What is their comfort level? Ryan's sitting here suggesting when we were in college and somebody was trying to decide, do we meet in this room or this room? Well, there's a comfort level because, well, that's the common room in my dorm, or, well, that's the lounge in the science lab, and that's where I spend all my time. We do the same thing with our technologies. We should use Slack because I'm in it all day long. And somebody else is like, oh God, I get so confused when I go there. I can't keep up. Individuals need kind of a comfort level across a few different technologies and a bit of a repertoire of collaborative practices if we're going to be able to bob and weave as our organizational changes throw curveballs at us, like a global pandemic or like a shrinking physical real estate footprint. So that's something we can be thinking of in our organizations as well. How do we foster the individual sometimes reskilling or digital literacy that an increasing digital employee experience is going to require, frankly, of all of us, and help people feel at ease making these changes, or as at ease as we can.
That actually leads really well into a question that Ruth submitted. And she asked if you're seeing organizations who are determined to revert back to a less digital workplace because they weren't really that comfortable being digital in the first place, and they only did it because of the pandemic.
I have seen that, and there's two notes on that. The first is there are certain kinds of employment situations or labor that are physical in nature, right? Things have to be shipped and built and manufactured and QA'd, right? Physical products and need to be handled oftentimes, and so absolutely, we've all seen friends and colleagues and relatives and neighbors who never worked from home during this thing, and didn't have to continue to go in and follow a lot of safety protocols that were new and different to them. So I think one important note is that there are employment conditions and situations and classes of labor that aren't well mediated digitally necessarily. So I think organizations being mindful of that and then figuring out how do we best serve those employees and facilitate the interaction of those who can be remote and it makes sense to do so there, and those who cannot, because oftentimes there are handoffs and knowledge exchanges and interactions that need to happen across those kinds of teams. How do we facilitate that? And then two, organizations that did not have what Gartner calls digital dexterity as an organizational capability. The right things weren't in place culturally or sometimes technologically for an organization to pivot to a digital first mode of operation. And so it's just through sheer discomfort that they're wanting to snap back. Well, to the degree that you can do that, and to the degree that there's not another situation that requires you to operate differently, good luck. But I don't think organizations or the research organizations of the world are banking on that. And so these capabilities, I think, are important in the viability of a lot of organizations. So it does take an investment in, I'm talking about reskilling and organizational capability. Well, that happens at the team member level. And so additionally, it takes technological investments. We had several customers speed up their LumApps launch because they were in process during the pandemic. And they were like, we were going to launch 4 months from now, but darn it, we need this tomorrow. How quickly can we get up and running? And that happened on a lot of technology project fronts. So getting that infrastructure in place. And again, at the outset, I said the digital workplace is a goal that's enabled by technology. So you can get the tech parts in place, but then you need the coordination and the culture and the individual skill set to leverage and make use of that technical investment.
I really love that you are calling it a goal, because I feel like it can sound overwhelming, or you can think like there's no way this will never happen. But to think of it as a goal, you can start taking steps towards it. Even if you don't get to the vision that you have, you can work towards that, because you know that is just a goal and it's not something to go for perfectly out of the box.
I'll share one last metaphor that I like to use, and sometimes it resonates well. And this is a great one. Those of you having these conversations with your organizations can leverage. You asked Dori, like, what's hard about it, or what are customers are kind of afraid of or get intimidated by. And it's the idea that, I need to have my technology landscape and my governance plan and my digital workplace strategy statement and like all this stuff in place. And a goal is something we continue to work towards. And I use the analogy of yoga practice. I am not great at yoga. It's something I do when I can get to it from time to time. But the nice thing about yoga as a practice that you can kind of keep going back to is you can modify the poses for your ability level. And if something's uncomfortable and you're not stretched, you're not flexible enough to get deeply into a pose, there's a shallow version of it. And we can start there and we deepen into the pose through the course of practice. That's exactly what this organizational capability is. Your governance model might start small and light and be a little awkward and uncomfortable at first. But as you get together and go into the practice together and have the conversations about what are we trying to coordinate, you can together get there and kind of deepen into a more mature digital workplace governance. So enjoy the yoga metaphor. Take it into your organization.
I love the yoga metaphor. And, you said you're not good at yoga. That is not a thing. That's what's so great about yoga, is that no one is perfect at yoga. There's no such thing as good or bad at yoga. And there's probably no such thing as being good or bad in a digital workplace. You're doing what you can to make it happen and make it a reality and improve your organization.
Well said, Dori. Exactly right.
Looks like we had another hand raised, Julie. So I'm gonna unmute her. Julie, if you want to ask.
Hi, Dori. Hi, Shaun. Hi, Amaret. It's like old home week. So here's the thing that really resonated with me, because I work for an old school insurance company that had to change quickly, obviously, during the pandemic, and really fell pretty well into the groove of using things like Teams, because we're a Microsoft shop, and got comfortable in it. And now they're looking at what they're calling reimagining the workplace, and they're completely changing our real estate. And now there's going to be free addressing. And, I just got my assignment. I'm going to be going back 1 day a week, and there's a lot, which is great, huge change. But the thing is that what resonated with me was the focus really on the physical space. And while they're talking about our technology and they're talking about things like, oh, well, if you forget your laptop, there'll be a loaner. If you forget your headset, there's going to be a vending machine where you can get a headset and it will go to your cost center, which is amazing. That's really sort of revolutionary for us. But the other stuff, they're not really thinking about. The culture stuff. They're worried about culture decline in the organization, but they're not really doing a lot to address it. And so my question is, Shaun, how would you go about having those conversations and influencing executive leadership in those environments?
Yeah, clearly I'm one for a metaphor, and drawing the analogies as you just did about the innovations in the physical workspace, and then asking the question, especially if there's an anticipation of a lot of the employee experience being remote. You kind of say, we've done this and we've done this, and you've implied the gap, and you don't always have to hit it head on, or you can begin to ask, what are we thinking about doing there? Or you can come with some suggestions and recommendations. Here are things I see other organizations doing. I'm the big one for, researching, Googling, anything I can find about what are other organizations doing around this particular problem. Around figuring out remote work, it is, I'm going to blank on the organization, the GitHub people, GitLab. They have a publicly available manifesto of best practices for making remote employment work, because they have been a remote first organization since their inception. And they've done an amazing job of sharing best practices. And that's where I go to say, hey, customers, and for our own organization, we don't have to figure this out by ourselves. There's a lot of good knowledge out there, and, handy guys who have been out here for a while figuring this stuff out that we can bring into the organization, either resources or consultants or, customer success people at our digital workplace vendor who can come and make recommendations and help guide and advise us through this. So I think it's raising awareness of where we're expending effort and perhaps not expending effort, leaving ourselves possibly vulnerable, invoking the coming kind of an employment and talent war. I've heard, the great talent migration or the great resignation invoked a time or three. These are conversations folks are having about, you've got your assignment. Folks are getting their assignment. Yeah.
It's already, I think there's, I think we've seen people leaving, and I think that keeping talent has always been an issue, but I think now employees have more leverage.
And I think that's something to be invoked in this conversation is, we've got to retain people. And this is another aspect of the employee experience that perhaps we're not attending to as mindfully as we are on the physical. So those are some of the conversations I would find a way to gently bring forward in conversations with leadership. And do, because we're part of that. It behooves us as a digital workplace vendor to say, hey, are you putting enough thought and effort into this other aspect of employees' experience?
Thanks.
And it looks like we are at the top of the hour. So huge thank you, Shaun and Dori, for an awesome session, super informative. And thank you everyone that joined. I really appreciate having you.